warm welcome and special thanks to all our panelists. And we have a sizable crowd here listening to us. We have almost the entire senior bureau from Mint and several senior partners from JSA as well. So looking forward to a really fruitful discussion. Like I discussed in the briefing call that we had, this is essentially a series that Mint and JSA are doing together to try and find ways to increase the per capita income of our country, because while our GDP is world beating, it's really big, it's good, it's growing faster than any other major economy, but our per capita economy, per capita income is really lagging. We are far behind. We are not even $2,500, which is really low. And so how do we bring that up? It's not something that can be done by distribution of wealth, right? So that's not possible. And so distribution of opportunity is something that we struck upon, and we think that that is probably a better approach to raising living standards and raising income levels of people all across. So the first of this series we did in Delhi on 21st August, in which we spoke about farmer incomes, and quite a few interesting thoughts came out of that. The income of farmers in the agriculture sector is crucial to our economy, especially when you think that many of the next generation farmers are really not interested in farming. So how do you keep them there so that they are able to earn enough money and live a certain standard of life? Likewise, here in Bombay, when we are discussing, we are going to talk about private capital investments and digital innovation and real estate investments. Real estate prices have really gone through the roof. You know, in the place where I stay in Ghaziabad, there's no place that you can find in the remotest part of Ghaziabad that's less than 2 crore for one apartment, which is like really, really high, right? So these are issues that are there. So while we talk about affordable housing, which hasn't really made much of an impact, but it is still something that's necessary. So how do we do that? And various other things that we'll discuss. I'm thankful to JSA, our partner, for facilitating this conversation, and thankful to all our panelists for coming here tonight.
The element is just not financial. It has to be inclusive growth. And when we talk about the inclusive growth, we need to talk about how the large hinterland needs to be sort of absorbed in this entire scheme of things. You know, unless the hinterland comes and be part of this, this entire exercise, there can't be a Viksit Bharat. That to begin with. Second, there are deep transformative changes happening in the Indian economy, and digital is clearly one. And we are now seeing the manufacturing coming of age. But is it enough to actually grow to the point of what the objective seems to be, a $30 trillion economy with a sizable GDP in excess of 6.5%? That means for the next 2.5 decades, we need to grow at 7% GDP or perhaps more. Where is the economy going to get the fuel? The private spend alone can't do it. The public spend has to be far in excess so that key drivers of the economy can be fueled appropriately. And I would like to here remind ourselves, some of the the Indian economists have pointed that we do have structures like a private-public partnership, but we need to just figure out what went wrong in the previous editions of the PPP and what can we do to spur that growth momentum. So I mean, those are my broad initial thought, but I think there are a lot to talk about in this discussion.
Right. Thank you, Vicky. Vishek.
Hey, first of all, thanks for having me over. I always like to stare at the problem first, even start thinking about what solution, right? And the problem, I think, Venkatesh, you rightly brought out. The problem is we need to, if we have any chance of Viksit Bharat or thereabout, we have to upgrade our per capita income by at least 5 times. Our GDP has to grow by at least 8 to 10 times. Now that's a good number. Let's break it down to the second level. Niti Aayog came out saying the debt intensity to GDP for any growth is 80%. If our GDP has to grow from $3.5 trillion, $4 trillion to $30 trillion, that's $26 trillion of real income. 80% of that is $20 trillion of additional capital that has to come into our banking sector. Where's that coming from? Where's that capital going to come from? And that's just the lending side of things, right? If you look at an average intensity of 1:2. Private capital, the equity that has to come along with that is an additional equity investment of another $10 trillion that has to come. Where will that come from? So I think it's important for us to start digging into some of the real problems and then say how we start solving, right? I think in the other room, we were having very interesting conversation. India has seen spurts of growth of 7, 8 years where different aspects of India grew. Many 20 years back, our automotive and manufacturing sort of grew. That slowed down. We had IT services grow. That slowed down. Last few years, we had luxury market grow because on behest of a lot of capital. In my mind, a lot of low-hanging fruits are done. So we are now staring at a situation where there's a significant growth that we have to do, and the first generation of the low-hanging issues or low-hanging fruits are done with, right? So what this needs is a more fundamental change to how we've seen growth. And by the way, I absolutely believe the way the West grew, which is burning massive amount of carbon to do the growth, or the way China grew, which is making for the world, I think those stories are gone. India does not have that way. So what's the India model of growth is something that we really need to reflect on. I have some thoughts, but I would say I would like to lay out the frame, at least in my mind.
GDP is a factor of two production factors, capital and labor. And I think India has the benefit of the best labor environment. We have 1.4 billion people, a stable political environment, world's largest democracy. And the capital will find the destination because we continue to have a very thriving capital markets, which has rewarded people over the last 20 years in some ways. Private equity, a sector that I have been in for last 20 years, has grown 10x. Nobody would have thought 20 years ago that this would be 10x the size, and people will be able to access capital. So I think if we continue to give a stable political environment, fast-growing economy, this talent, which has been creating value, capital will have to find destination. Both domestic and foreign capital will continue here. And India will find its talent, which has been groomed in our engineering colleges and our IITs and whatnot, to create the next engine for growth for not just India, but for the world. People have been talking about AI, Gen AI, and while all the innovation seems to get all the headlines in the US, I think at scale, these things will be built in India. Whether they get built through our IT services firms, whether they get built through the GCCs, but it would be done by the Indian talent. And hence, I feel very optimistic about our future ahead.
I think we were talking about the real estate prices. I think real estate prices have gone up, and I think you gave the Ghaziabad example, right? It's absolutely true. And I represent, right now real estate, but I also used to do a lot of work in other sectors in my consulting days as well as Mahindra as a strategy head. But the key thing there is there is not going to be any issue on the demand side, and you'll find even in the real estate there is enough takers for it, because that market does not look at per capita income. It look at per household income, which is 3 times. So when you buy a home, your parents contribute, your children contribute, your family contributes. So there is enough demand that will continue to come in that sector also. So that's the first point. The demand is inherently here in this country and will only go up as the income goes up, as the per capita, the household income goes up. That's a significant part. I think the second part is the supply aspect. I think we know until 91 the supply was very different. Over the last 30 years, the supply has been addressed in multiple ways. But I would say that this is where the Viksit Bharat has to really perform. There is a saying in US that many people say that America is great. It has great roads, great highways. But the saying in Americans is America is great because it has great highways. America became great because it has great highways. 56% of its logistics happens on roads, right? The quality of roads, quality of infrastructure. So what made America great is the roads and infrastructure, and same thing has to happen in this country. And the supply is the biggest area where the PPP can actually contribute significantly to the earlier point made. I happen to have in my industrial business one of the most successful PPP. It's called Mahindra World City Jaipur, Mahindra World City Chennai, which are partnerships with government. 11% and 26% Tamil Nadu government and Jaipur government. And it has its ups and downs, but largely it has been able to attract some of the most promising MNCs, domestic companies to set up their shops, their operations in those world cities. But connecting those to their suppliers, to the customers, demand and consumption center is something that we still have to solve significantly. Delhi to Bombay by road still takes 3 days, right? It used to take 7 days. Now it's gone down to 3 days. But it's 1100 kilometers, right? Can it be done in 2 days? Can it be done in one day? In US, it happens in one day, like 600 miles, 700 miles, it happens in one day, right? So that's the supply part that needs to be addressed, and we can go on about other infrastructure elements. And I think the third thing is the capital point, which my colleagues have addressed here. I think if you look at the global macro geopolitical, I think Kapil, you said that capital will find a home for the country where there is a stability, there are returns in line with the risk associated with the market, and I think we have seen that foreign capital FDI has continued to go, but now we are sufficient from the SIP phenomena that we have seen in this country. The domestic consumers will support the market as well. So there is enough capital in the market. Sometimes, too much, I guess, there is a little bit of froth which will get corrected. But I think that's a critical element that's there. Finally, I'll just add the point about ease of doing business, which needs a little bit of refinement. I've seen, I think all of us have been seeing the challenges of GST implementation, demonetization, and the after effect of many of the things that has taken time to stabilize. But if that can be addressed sooner, it will create so much more efficiency in the way we operate as individual companies as well as partnership with other players. So those are the few thoughts from my side.
Continuing with what thoughts Amit had, I feel the manufacturing GDP in India is around 16, less than 16. It was above 17 for a brief period between 2006 to 2010. After that, it has never gone up. And even though there's a lot of push by the government in the last 2 years, 2-3 years, I still it is stagnating. One of the major reason I believe is, as Amit said, the infrastructure. Even though government has been talking about a lot of infrastructure projects, whether it's really making a difference. Because the logistics cost in India as a percentage of GDP is still around 13-14%, whereas in developed countries it is 8%. So the 6% what we spent extra on delays, inventories, storage, maybe all these things add up to the cost. You just take Mumbai-Delhi corridor, freight corridor. 2019 was the initial closure. Today we are in 24. It is nowhere in sight. So most of the infrastructure project, if you really go back to the day when it was initially announced and completion, in India it takes 20 years. You take any project further, including your coastal road, anything, it takes 20 years. Multiple government comes, multiple bidding happens and delays. These kind of delays are creating, because you are thinking 20 years back and today the infrastructure may not be sufficient what you build.
Yeah.
So we are always much behind where we want to be. That is the biggest problem. And capital also, the capital flow into India, even though it finds a way, but within India there are enough capital which doesn't flow into infrastructure, like pension funds. 40 lakhs crore is the total size. The insurance, around 50 lakh crore is the SP life insurance AUM. This is a size of the amount is available in India if the part of it goes into infrastructure. Because our Surface Transport Minister Gadkari keeps talking about funds not being provided by the bank, and because banks have basically low tenor deposit. They cannot be funding long tenor infrastructure. It has to come from the pension funds and long-term funds. So that something has to be done in channelizing these funds into infrastructure. then only I think there will be a sustainable progress on the development. Otherwise, this 8% cost, additional cost which we incur, will never be competitive in the world. Any product you do. Otherwise, we will do some assembling with 5 to 10% margin, and that's the end of it. Whatever we do is assembling. We will not be able to create a product which can reach fast to the globe and be a leader in the global standards. That's where I feel we need to think on infrastructure as the major what to call focus by the government and everybody involved.
And government has been spending a lot on infrastructure, but I think they've brought it down a little bit in this year's budget.
Announcements are different from the implementation.
Real implementation. Okay. Niranjan ji.
Let's start with my own subjects of housing.
Yes.
If you look at the growth of China, when it grew more than 10 to 12%, focus was on housing and infrastructure. So if India has to go into double-digit growth, the emphasis which everybody is talking about on infrastructure and housing has to grow exponentially. Whether that money comes from banks, whether it comes from private, whether it comes from public, whether it comes from FDI is irrelevant. Number two, there is ultimately availability of money for any project in India. There is no shortage of money. It's the question of ease of doing business. It is creating proper projects which actually look viable to be able to be funded. And there's no. I'll give you a small example of Mumbai. We had, for last 65 years, 190 kilometers of suburban rail, Western Railway, Central Railway, and Harbour Line. In next 2 years, we will add 330 kilometers complete. We were waiting for 60 years for doing the Cross Harbour Bridge, which was originally to cost us 150 crores. We have now completed it at 22,000 crores. Bombay-Pune Road, we completed at that time 20 years ago, which cost us 1,650 crores of rupees, including interest during construction period. Today, that would have cost us 22,000 crores. So we completed at that time. Now, Mumbai, because of metro, Cross Harbour Bridge, Coastal Road and others, we are going to spend 3 lakh crores of rupees in 5-7 years. In 65 years, central and state governments have not spent 30,000 crores for Mumbai infrastructure. So once the direction is given and overall intent is given and proper administrative work is done and technologically, economically, the viability of schemes are created, there is no shortage of money at all. We've been able to get JICA to give 70% funding at 0.1% interest for 50 years with 15 years sabbatical, and all that is available. So money is not a shortage. This is the first time in the history that I have lived in, and I'm 74, I've never dreamt that we would have unlimited amount of money for projects which are viable from anywhere in the world. So that's one. Second, we talk about housing, we talk about roads, we talk about logistics. Everybody looks at it as a problem. I don't. I look at it as an opportunity. There are no roads to be built in Europe. There are no roads to be built in Japan. There are no roads to be built in America. That's why their GDP growth is 2%, 3%, and 4%. So why are we looking at this as a problem? My view is this is an opportunity. Second, we are looking at labor problem. What is labor problem? If I want 100 labor today, which are skilled, or carpenters, labor I want, skilled labor. I'm not talking about engineers and doctors and all those highly skilled people who have to go through colleges. 1 year of skilling. I need carpenters, fitters, plumbers, electricians and all. I can get qualified civil engineer, gold medalist to come to my office. But if I want 100 skilled labor, I don't get 20. And we are talking about shortage of labor. So this is an opportunity. All you got to do is skill these labor people for 1 year and you will be able to handle it. So I think next 5 years, if we don't grow, I would be very sad. And and the opportunity is too big to be true, unbelievable. It's an India story, and India story. There's no other country in the world which can possibly grow at the pace and speed that we have. And our people will benefit. We will all become richer. Whatever you talk about, ordinary people not having money, they will get money because they will contribute. Not because we are giving them a favors or giving them free things. No, skill them. And they will be the persons who will earn. And in fact, the country will grow. The rich people will become richer because of those people getting employed.
Right.
I think it's the contrary. We think of giving them subsidy. They are the ones who are going to make the nation great. And I don't see anything else except a great future for India.
That's really good. Some very positive thoughts and some challenging issues. Gopika?
Yeah, I think all of you have very clearly laid down the macro issues. But I'm curious to know, as investors and India Inc., how are you sort of relooking at your own growth strategies and plans to achieve, to see India at 2047? Because we are looking at huge capacity building. So how are you looking at, I mean, are you sort of, or have you already started preparing for that?
US can give an IRA of $10 trillion. Capital flows there.
Right.
We as a country, we don't have that. Sometimes I actually genuinely believe, as private sector investor, foreign investors, sometimes the India's risk return actually does not work out. And the problem is, I can do transactions as much as we want in India. There's no flow. The problem is the returns that you start making. And the returns come down to, I think, some of the points that we spoke about. There are still many uncertainties that come across. Dispute resolution. Any infrastructure dispute is bound to happen. Right? When disputes happen, they need to be resolved. It still takes enormously long time. Our courts take ultimately, thankfully, we're not China. It will get resolved and we will get the final thing, right? But dispute it's enormous. You have to go back. If the counterparty is government, you spend a lot of time just getting those things out. Now, those are real issues. And when a foreign investor is sitting outside India and hearing these stories, it's just, that does not go very well. So what you see is there's a lot of capital sitting on the sidelines, wanting to come, but becoming hesitant to invest because of the horror story. So there's an element of how we bring out some of the success stories, which is an important element for the country as well.
I think you talked about the 2047 view. I started with saying the private equity grew 10x in last 20 years. I think the golden period is further ahead of us. I tell all the young people in my industry that the best time is yet to come, and the next 20 years would be even better. People will have to be disciplined and consistent for getting the right returns, right? If you look at even Warren Buffett, his returns are good in a consistent compounding manner. Each year he won't be amongst the highest in that sense. So people will pick their spots. The key is, how do you add value beyond just capital? Because there is that whole talent element. If we have to grow manufacturing in our country, we have to become efficient, to the point that Umesh said, and we'll have to open doors to the global markets to become the most competitive source of those products, just like we are today in IT, right? As he talked about, which is a sector where India is well recognized. I also think that we have very strong foundations. The financial services sector in which Umesh operates in, I think it's one of the most well-governed sectors that we have. The things like what this system has built around UPI and Aadhaar is second to none across the world. And countries like US, which have physical infrastructure, are still struggling on that digital infrastructure. They can't believe that UPI is so seamless, right? Even Google can't believe it. I have been party to some of those conversations. And I think we will find solutions. To what you said, from long-term capital perspective, from getting the domestic capital to flow into the right areas and markets, things like REITs and InvITs did not exist, right? They got created and they will only become more and more popular. So I feel very optimistic, and I think this is the best place to be.
To Abhishek's point, and I think while we need to be exuberant about the fact that it is definitely doable, but let's just see what is happening on the ground. And I'm talking purely from the experience, and speaking from the point of view, if an investor, forget about foreign investor, even a domestic investor, were to just, and the appetite may be greater. I'm not talking about that relatively. And I'll give you a few examples. Now, guys who invested in the EV world 10 years back, they had a path called fame, right? Now, suddenly, one fine morning, that path disappears. Now, people who are going to put some incremental dollars, rupee in this business, thinking that there is going to be a demand side incentive being given by the government, has disappeared completely now. Now they are relying on different schemes, a PLI scheme, electric vehicle manufacturing scheme. Whether you fit in the bill, you have to spend 4,500 crores, by the way, to fit into that bill. Now, please tell me, if there is no policy stability, there is no predictability, how on earth can the investors draw up their design boards? That's point one. Point two, capital has to find a return. There has to be an ROE element in it. Now, if a state pulls a plug on, PPAs, suddenly one fine morning, where does the entire industry goes? It goes to the point sanctity of contract, not at the state level, but at the national level. We get questioned: is there a concept of sanctity of contracts in the year 2022? I mean, that's pretty late in the day. Third point on dispute resolution. I think a lot has been done. It is not as if nothing has been done. A lot has been done, but you still don't have savvy commercial judges manning the docket. It takes a lot of time to explain what an economic project means. And this we have seen in different sectors panning out, whether that be telecom, whether that be roads, as simple as road, by the way, or aviation. It takes enormous amount of time for the judiciary to actually understand the concept of economic viability. They're still on balance of preponderance, balance of, balancing the fairness on either side. So I think there has to be some capacity, serious capacity building at different layers of our institution.
Amit, I'll take you as a proxy for the whole Mahindra group since you are here, and Mahindra is into everything that he's saying, right? From real estate to manufacturing to disputes and all of that. So what is your view on this whole thing? And the other thing also is that manufacturing, like it's 16, 17%, 17% was the highest, right? In recent times, we were our target stated objective was 25%, which doesn't seem, possible, quite honestly, even to be brutally frank. So what is the issue? And even if we go to 25%, is it necessarily going to raise income levels of a lot of people? Not to forget that 800 million people of our country is on dole. They get free food. So it's actually, we are only talking about the 600 million who are earning.
Yeah.
And that too, who are part of the workforce.
So let me try to answer that, attempt to answer that. That's not an easy question to answer, but we at Mahindra or in many other places, there's a concept of romantic Indian investor. And there is a financial investor, right? And some of them are here. Right?
Romantic Indian investor, okay.
Romantic Indian investor is someone who believes like India is going to grow, without any problem. Whatever government says on fame and other policies will exist without any problem. There will not be any disputes. There will be no demand issues. Supply will come. Connectedness on the logistics side will solve many of the problems, and the financial case will get delivered. I think we tend to, in the manufacturing sector, most of the investors tend to be on the financial side. They don't believe the demand story as much as they should. And the primary reason is they think that we should add capacity or investment for incremental capacity, right? What that means is if Mahindra manufactures 4 million vehicles, or a million vehicle market is 4 million, next year it'll go 15%, 20%. It will not plan for 8 million, 10 million, 15 million, 20 million. That incremental capacity doesn't give you the scale advantage. When China thinks about investment or Chinese players think about investment, they think of global opportunity. They don't think about incremental domestic opportunity. They are making the investment for the world. You look at any sector, like 10 years back or 15 years back when the solar was nowhere to be seen, right? China put gigawatts of manufacturing capacity for solar module, and they've never been able to catch up. No country has ever been able to catch up to what they have been able to do. 5-7 years later, when the storage batteries became the next big sector, they put so much capacity in the ground that no other country can ever catch up. Now Europe is trying to do a few things together to catch up to them, but the scale is just, David and Goliath, right? Just not being there. So coming back to Indian context, while the demand could be there, but most of us, when we are making capex decisions, we are always looking at, hey, near term, 2-3 years, so that we are not going to be in a situation when we are thinking and dreaming about a opportunity or price that existed or should have existed but never happened. And that plagues the whole competitiveness of this sector, combined with the fact that logistics and other efficiency make us less competitive. We are always going to be behind the curve in the manufacturing sector. So to answer your question about 800 million, 400 million, when we think about smaller incremental capacity versus large capacity, we are going to be very different. Semiconductor, like finally it's coming to India. In my consulting days, we've done the analysis. India can never keep up, can never match to the semiconductor capacity that other countries have, right? US has it, China has it, and some of the other countries, but the center of gravity is still China. Why? Not only they put huge capacity, but the whole ecosystem developed so well around them that no other country can match to them. Let's see how our investors, our manufacturing, the companies, including Tata, that have signed up for this. Let's see how they perform. But there's going to be a huge deficit in terms of the scale at a country that China has, and that what we will have today to meet our needs as well as global needs. So while I think your question is very sane that we need to go from 15 to or 17 to 25, the challenge will always be our mentality or our mindset, whether we can think so big, can we be romantic enough to say that, to take that risk and then have the right set of partners to achieve that.
The $30 trillion seems like a romantic thing.
The problem, Amit, is, I won't say the problem. I think the Indian industry was pretty romantic 20 years back. It burns its finger quite badly, right? Unfortunately, it's a bit of a baggage that the industry and the banks are carrying. And that is also, I genuinely believe, is becoming a bit of a detriment. Everything said and done, I actually still believe in the strong entrepreneurship culture of the country. There's just no two ways about it. There's US market, there's India market. There's no other country, at least, you guys have seen the world. I see no other country where entrepreneurship is as great as it could be, right? What this entrepreneurship needs is stability, right? If a policy has been taken, it needs to be stuck to. I cannot be left to the mercy of a government A or a government B or a coalition or XYZ. That's what it needs to be. I need the capital market, the debt markets to back me, right? If some of these enablers are done, I have absolutely no doubt that the entrepreneurship of India will actually we actually err on being more risk-taking than less.
Abhishek, if I may ask a question, because I think, you and Kapil, you have, your LPs are sitting outside India, right? They have a dollar return expectations, right? Whereas if you look at how the market is moving towards, it's becoming more and more, even though only 10% people are investing in the SIP and stock market, less than 10%, right? But what is the direction it's taking is that domestic capital is going to become more and more important as growth capital, right? In the past, in my real estate sector and industrial sector, I used to get, hey, let's put equity in the residential sector, and here are our expectations. I'll take 3% rupee depreciation, and that's the net returns I'll get. But the Indian guys are coming and saying, hey, I don't care about the dollar part. I have enough AMC coming in, money in the AMC. I want to diversify my sector that I want to participate, and I have enough domestic money without worry of any dollar to rupee conversion risk.
Niranjanji, you are saying that it takes 60 years to finish a project and 20 years to finish most projects. You have a lot of money in the industry which is basically lying around and not being utilized in the way that you'd like it to. But there are regulations and all also. There's a very interesting, it's not an anecdote, but a very simple reflect back. In 2017, I had done a similar roundtable. And India was not yet 75. We were 5 years away from 75. So we did this roundtable called India at 75. Nowadays we are doing India at 100. Pretty much we were discussing the same thing. and pretty much nothing has changed. But I really want to know, has really nothing changed? Because at that time, 2017, the target was $5 trillion by 2022. You will remember it very well. Then that was revised to 2024. We are here in 2024, we are not close to $5 trillion. So we keep setting these targets, just like our road projects. We have projects and we say, we'll complete by this year. Oh, 10 saal aur piche ho gaya. So how is this culture ever going to change? Is what is needed? If you need all the skilled people, we've been talking about skilling for years now, right? The plumbers, electricians, even the technical people. There is a shortage everywhere. There has been a shortage for several years. There are pension fund issues has been there for several years, but nobody wants to take the risk in government ki pension ko aap idhar lagao. है ना? How can these things change?
It will change. I don't think, I think there is an impatience in the people today. They're not going to tolerate anybody or any government now which does not deliver. There's going to be a big change that you are seeing, and I see that feeling in the ground. The aspirations of the people are just unbelievably higher. They're intolerant. They're not going to accept what governments are talking about, and they want to see the delivery happen. I don't think, I mean, 10-15 साल पहले लोग बोलते थे, हाँ, सरकार कोशिश कर रही है. I don't think they are accepting that at all. I think people in the new setup, the middle class want to be at the next level. The entrepreneurship, I run 14 colleges in Bombay. I have 45,000 students in colleges. I mean, they're all talking about how we can become startups, how we can do business, how we can do all the other items. 15 years ago, I don't think maybe 1 or 2% said, हमारे बाप दादा के business हम करने वाले हैं. Nobody thought that I will move away from the business of my father and mother and uncle and aunties and whatever it is and start up something which is new to be done. So I am very optimistic that this country is now demanding from the people and the government that you need to make a difference. It's not just people, and you will see increasingly that this is so. Number two, the growth of incomes has taken place. So it's not something that we are just seeing as a kal hone wala hai. No. Third, a lot of people are spending on items. Everybody wants the smartphone. And believe you me, they are paying EMIs of 3 years and all that in order to get one smartphone. And I'm myself surprised how they are able to even think about it. Forget that part of it. The people who are talking about two-wheelers, 25 years ago, I would have 6 cars of employees coming to my office. I have now 250 cars. I can't park them in the office area, which is for each and every one of them. And I'm not talking about two-wheelers. There are too many of them. So that thought process which we are talking about of an aspirational Indian, if you are still thinking that people are going to accept nonsense from any government, local authority of people, any government, those governments will not be able to stay. And second, social media connect is so fast. If they are not delivering, 20,000 people will know it within 30 seconds. What I'm doing and speaking over here will be known to each and every person in 25 minutes. And people are going to be very intolerant of what it is. I make a speech yesterday, it has reached 5 lakh people. I can't believe it. This is a complete change that you're talking about. And if tomorrow the young people are aspirational, country is going to grow. And as many of you have said, there are very few countries in the world where investments can take place. Money will not be shorted. This is what I'm saying.
Last 15 days back, I was in Mangalore. One deemed university invited me for the convocation, and I was talking to the VC. He said, one Japan conglomerate, Shibao, he said, I remember, 100 engineers from his institute were placed there. And they have understanding that they will come and make a campus recruitment. That's very unheard. Mangalore University, not in the big city, and 100 engineers going to Japan. That means there is shortage of people, skilled people in the globe. That's one great opportunity we have. If at all we market it properly and have properly trained people to go there. That's one part. The second, we are talking about rural. In the rural, we have 65% of population depending on agriculture, which is 17% of the GDP. That is why you have 65% of the population dependent on agri. Now, I'm a cricketer. I was a cricketer. The basic rule is, when you get edges, when you bat, go back to the basics, play straight, play in a V. That means you have to go back to the basics. I believe the government need to take initiative in establishing the polytechnics and ITI to build this semi-skill or skill, whatever name you put it, to make all this trained manpower, because they all, instead of going to agricultural related activity which doesn't produce enough GDP or wealth, they can be shifted, because it should be in the rural area, not in the urban area. Otherwise, the rural people will not come to urban or semi-urban area to learn or educate. The government has to do it, and these people can be huge advantage for Indians manufacturing and Indian business as well as global business.
Abhishek spoke about the whole India growth model. How do we see this growth model? Like recently, Professor Raghuram Rajan said that it should be a services-led growth model. So, where do you find this balance of tilting towards an excellence in manufacturing, or looking at more services-driven? And what would be the risk to that sort of?
Having said that, there are certain things which made a lot of sense to me, which is what I referred to. We need to go back. West grew by massively by just burning energy. That was the way, right? Tons of coal, tons of crude, and that's what you grow. That's not an option for us. The 9 out of 10 most polluted cities in the world is in India. That's not an option. Irrespective of what you do, unfortunately, there's also a reason why we have so many really rich guys also moving out of India while having businesses in India, right? So let's take a macro view of things. Right? Second, as I said, we are now fast entering into a world which is rapidly becoming de-globalized. And that's not going to change. That's a decadal phenomenon. It's not a 2-3 year phenomenon. And hence, make in China for the world, that option is not available. China plus one, enough has been talked about. There are reasons why we benefited a bit, but that's not our model. I think it's a bit of a complex, and hence the problem in front of us, and I think a solution in front of us is a bit of a hybrid and a complex side of things. I think, and which is what many of the panelists just talked about. We have to do a more grassroots. Right? We are flogging the same dead cow, trying to get. I think our R&D, if I remember correctly, was what 0.3%, 0.4% of GDP at a GDP of $3.5 trillion. US is 2.5-3% of GDP at $25 trillion. How are we competing? We need to be ahead of the curve. We cannot be behind the curve. So I think there are some of these basic elements, Gopika, in my mind, what needs to be done. So we're coming late to the party in terms of growth model, and hence there's no easy solution. But there are many of these aspects which we need to really solve.
If I were to add to what Abhishek said, I think India will not go the US model of growth. India will not go the China model of growth. India will go to India model of growth, which would be a hybrid of services and manufacturing. If I were to guess, 10 years hence also, services will remain the largest component of our economy. With this kind of a entrepreneurship-oriented population, every person trying to become a micro-entrepreneur, I think we have a very vibrant services ecosystem, which we can continue to grow and keep it a pillar, and add the second engine through manufacturing, through thoughtful manufacturing. What he said about R&D will result in product innovation, right? And will result in what we will be able to build for the world, not just because we are the cheapest, but we are the best. That's how things have to be done. If we try to do what we did as UPI for our domestic market, build the Gen AI for the world, that is where we will be seen. The whole of the TSMC, a small country in Taiwan, builds the chips for the world, right? So if we have to do our semiconductor manufacturing, just like TCS runs half of the world's office in some ways, they have to start running the world's fabs. It will help all of us in some ways.
Yeah, but Venki and others, we have to do more R&D.
Yes.
Kaun karega?
Yeah. So
Who's going to do it?
So before I get into the R&D problem, let's just see what are the statistics telling us. And these are Government of India statistics. And I was reading them, I was quite taken aback. And let's see how it fits into what we are debating. India has one of the youngest population with a median age of 28 years. 65% of the fastest growing population is under 35 years. Out of which 51% is the employable pool which is yet to be employed. Now, we are talking of demographic dividends here. Skilling is not just service oriented, it has to be at different layers of the economy, at the agrarian, at the manufacturing, at the services, and healthcare. We are forgetting that any sort of society is built on fundamentals, healthcare, education, and roti kapda and makan. Now, those fundamentals have to be, wired into our rural economy. Who's going to do that? Private side is not going to come and start doing all of that. The incremental money has to be spent by the government to build this building block. It's almost like building the DNA for the the future replication of the next level of growth to happen. So that was one point. To the point being made about that India has to forget a part of that energy curve. Let's just see what the data is telling us. The energy, the famous energy pie of India. 65 to 69% is coal-driven power. 20% is oil-based power. A very fragmented 3 to 4% is renewable. Another 2 to 5% is hydro, and less than 2% is nuclear. Now, if we have to go green, yes, there is a target of 500 gigawatt by 2030. We are still in our 120 to 140 kind of gigawatt scenario. So we have a lot of time and capacity to build up and ramp up, which means that the green energy is not, I think, going to power India. It is the old energy source which will still power India. And rightfully so, what India did is to ask for time till 2070 for the net zero, balancing out in 2050 to show some incremental step, and said that we will use all sources of energy to power our engines, which is a very wise way of doing it. But I think we have to do a little bit more. We have to just basically ensure that the financing of the green energy also happens at a rapid pace. We are talking of the infrastructure lagging behind and the financing lagging behind this entire growth story, and that's another issue that we have to just deal with, the infrastructure of the green energy.
Rakesh, if I were to answer the question that you asked, who will do the innovation R&D? I think we have built fantastic institutions for the undergraduate program. People go to the IITs, and then to do their masters and PhDs, they move to US.
Yeah.
And that's the time that they do the innovation and R&D, right? We have to, one, bring some of that talent back. We have to give them the opportunities to do that innovation in this country. And two, we have to put the right infrastructure so that kids of Amit and Abhishek don't need to go out, but they can stay here. So that means we have to create a lot more of these institutions, and not just in engineering, but in every field, including humanities and everything, for people to do innovation and R&D and to create beautiful products out here.
We are talking about GDP growth per capita, ultimately of doing it. One thing we need to address in addition to that is to give employment to everybody. Today, our education system as a whole is creating a lot of good, educated people. 30% of them don't get jobs. In the skilling sector, by giving them 6 months to 1 year to 1.5 years of skilling, 100% of them gets jobs. And today we can solve the problem of unemployment. Forget all capital investment and growth on one side, and just think of employment on the other side. And your investments in skilling will not only pay for that with industry, with government and other people, but it is imperative for democracy to succeed and continue in India.
Correct.
You will destroy democracy in India if you don't do it. It's scary because the rich and those people who get jobs on the whole thing will be fantastic. And these people are going to be unemployed, whether they will be underemployed as remaining in agriculture, as somebody mentioned the statistics. So they will be underemployed, they'll be unemployed, their capacity to spend money will actually get destroyed. Government will continue to give doles to these people. And at the same time, if you had skilled them, they would actually contribute to the country. And those are the areas where today we need. So when I'm making houses, when I'm making roads, when we are doing infrastructure, when we are creating all these things, today, 3 million people, one company called L&T needs 25,000 skilled people which are not available to them. This is a declaration stated officially in all the newspapers by one company. I need 3,000. I'm a small company in relative to L&T. Just multiply by the number of companies which are there. And I'm not even talking about roads, ports, airports and other things. We actually can. And if you don't look at that, all the growth and money that people will make and this country will make is scary because you're now creating a new divide of people who will be rich and employed and poor and unemployed, which continues to be receiving doles by the government, and the government has to do it because they have to go for elections next time. So you have a solution, economic solution by which you can do and spend less on normal education that you're talking about and spend all that money into skilling. In the next 5 years, 10 years, you'll have a different country completely in terms of the employment. Sir, it's irrelevant. Those who believe in India are plenty. Just
so.
trust your people who remain over here. There are enough and more like me who believe in this country. And in next 5 years, if we can do what we are talking today, all those people will come here. Number two, I know 10 of them who are sitting over there and now decided not to invest there, but to bring the money back over here.
It's great.
So they may be living in Dubai, living in Barbados, living in London, living in this thing. Next year, you will see 10 times more investment coming to India from the same people who have taken the money out there will come to India because India has the future. The Western world doesn't. America is an exception. But the rest of the world doesn't have any future in terms comparative to the opportunities in India.
Before we wind up, I have one question that I want everybody to answer. Quick time. What is the single biggest risk in your mind that India faces in its journey to 30 trillion by 2047? What is the one thing? There are many things. You can continue to talk about various challenges and problems. But what is the single most important challenge in your mind for India that we have to be careful of not stumbling? Start with you.
I think, and this is not legal, I think it's inclusiveness. This is the single largest challenge, I believe. And if we are able to fix that inclusiveness challenge, I think we have a lot of things sorted in.
Okay. Abhishek.
I would have gone for that, but now that you've said it, my biggest fear is, the world moves, the pendulum goes back to the base. The last 7 years is the average of India for last 60 years. This is driven by a strong person at the center who's driven it top down. That guy is not going to be around for forever, right? My fear is we will go back to our usual way of doing things in absence of a strong top-down leadership, right? So how can we make it more systematic, which is devoid of individual rather than systems?
Kapil.
I would say skilling and education of these people who are coming into the workforce and giving them high employee productivity. So getting the best, that's what will lead to the per capita income increase for them by giving them most productive employment. So through skilling.
Inclusiveness, political stability, and skilling is gone. So I'll choose the next one, I think. For me, one of the big things is resource intensity and security. Energy, water, many other things in between. I think We are already dependent on many of these, and we are going to get more and more dependent on some of the other ones. For us to grow and reach the per capita, the consumption part require us to be energy sufficient, water sufficient, resource sufficient, and that's a big gap from just where we are endowed from all the natural resources. That's a worry. That needs to be resolved.
Right. Umesh ji.
I may be repeating the low income and lower mid income families spending huge money on education in a private and thinking that their children are going to sit in AC room and earning. And this phobia, every graduate today wants to be in AC room and doing coding. That is a major issue. So we need to build skill so that they get a job. Then they can always study if they have what to call that kind of intelligence or maybe urgency.
I think execution. I think timely execution is not happening. And when you say it's going to be ready in December of 24, it should be ready in December of 24. No questions asked. Execution is just still lacking in many of the fields, and there are important areas that where I think execution will become important if the multiplier effect has to be taking place. So, for example, the important part which you said, if I can reduce logistics cost from 12% to 6% in the next 5 years, every item that you export and competitiveness becomes 6% cheaper for you and me to buy or for purposes of international competitiveness. So execution is the key.
Thank you very, very much for coming, and I hope you all had a good time. Does anybody have a question? You have a question. Okay. Keep it short, so we'll have a short answer.
The only thing is what Abhishek said. I don't think we've solved that, right? Long-term funding. What my question therefore is, what do we do? Because we have that short-term money and there is no real sort of shortage. But what do we do to get that long-term money? What is it that is there in the US that allows that funding of infrastructure? Because see, banks have funded it for a long time and they've burnt their fingers.
I think the solution is extremely well known, honestly, right? It's we are extremely well regulated on the banking sector. I genuinely think we have become very risk averse because I think I made a statement. We have a baggage of the past that we are dragging on, right? We don't have to be risk averse. We have to open up long term. We have, for the first time, our pension funds, our insurance company, our NPS have billions of dollars sitting in. That's the only way to get long term. Banks cannot do their CASA does not allow. Their asset side is sitting on somewhere else. The liability, their ALM cannot allow, right? So that's an easy one, and we have the opportunity. I think RBI and the regulators just need to take it a bit easy. Allow for a few NPAs to happen, man. If you're not doing NPAs, then you're not taking risk. That's
Umesh, what's your chance of success with the governor in getting the pension funds and others to invest in long-term projects?
I think it is not a governor which the policy is defined by the
Government.
finance ministry. I think it has to be done from finance ministry. RBI will not get into this. The infrastructure funds getting created out of pension funds.
True.
I don't think it will come in.
It's not going to happen.
It's not the domain of governance.
Yeah, but what are the chances of this?
It will happen because see, if Canada pension fund they come and invest in Indian,
They are investing like anything, OTP.
why not
and
Indian
others.
pension fund do it?
We are just watching other pension funds come into our country and make money.
It will happen.
Thank you for the question.
India has to come back to the original 3% of the fiscal deficit. But whether the tax to GDP, can it increase so that they will be able to come? That is because from your experience, sir, because it is increasing around 11%, but still quite a lot of because the high rate of taxation is given by hardly 1 or 2 crores. All others are nil statement. So how that can improve?
I don't think the government, what has happened is we lost out 65 years of not investing in infrastructure to the extent which we need to do. So one is catch up. The second is that we need education, whether it's skilling or otherwise. We need health infrastructure, which is also important. The base of all this is required to be done by the government. On top of it, all of us will invest. So if you look at the private investor, look at the amount of money which they are putting in SIPs. So it is the private player is doing it, only it's doing it through the medium of the capital markets. So it's not that the private people are, so money, that's why I said, when the country goes up, money is never a shortage. Whether it is done by deficit, whether it is done by taxation. Look at what GST collections have happened. The government and the finance ministry themselves are telling us, we never thought that the GST would grow to the extent it is. Look at the bonus given by RBI in terms of to the government. I mean, amazing. I mean, what RBI gave for 10 years, they have done it in 1 year. So it's again, when we talk about capital, there is no dearth. What if you can fix all the other things? Capital will come from the world, it will come from individuals, it will be from SIPs, it will be capital markets, not to worry. Because that deficit has disappeared. Earlier, it should be, पैसे कहाँ से आएंगे ये project करने के लिए? आज वो project का पैसे नहीं है. You make it viable, the money is available. He may give it, I may give it, government may give it, whoever may give it. You have to do more projects, more execution, more this. So, last point which you said, how is government going to deal with very things? There are political issues which governments have to face. So I think they are also stuck in terms of doing that. But if you do skilling, if you give proper thing, you give employment, you will need to give less money into that segment. So that is something there. And second, if tomorrow there is so much prosperity among the middle class and the rich, and these poor people have nothing, can you imagine? Can you run a democracy in India without that? So even giving doles is a need at this point of time. We need to eliminate the need for doing it. Once you eliminate the need, then politically they'll be able to handle it. Today, I'm living prosperity. I'm running in a luxury car. I'm doing everything good. Even the middle class are going to all the malls and making money. And the poor people don't get jobs. It's a horrible thing to happen in any country of the world. Forget India. So I want to give doles today, but I want to run the company in the next 5 years, the country in the next 5 years, in order to see that I do not need to give that many doles which we are giving today. Because that is a political necessity for them. They are also political animals. They have to win the election. But this will go only if we continue to create employment. Very important.